Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. Now, is Harley-Davidson's new motorcycle, the Sportster S, a revelation, or is it wandering around in the dark here in India? It's time for us to find out.
So it's been almost 10 years now that American bike manufacturer Harley-Davidson has been seen to be experimenting with its motorcycles. Now it's tended to drift away from the traditional burly chrome-clad cruisers of the past and cater to the more modern motorcycles of today. Cut back to 2013 where Harley-Davidson came out with the Live-Wire electric motorcycle, which now Live-Wire is a completely different spin-off brand on its own. And a year later, Harley-Davidson came out with the Street 750, the street-based motorcycle, which not a lot of people really took a liking to. A couple of years later, Harley-Davidson introduced the big Pan America 1250, the adventure motorcycle that honestly no old-school Harley-Davidson aficionado ever saw coming in their wildest dreams or even their nightmares. And now, here we have the brand's next step in evolution, the Sportster S. Now, although Harley-Davidson is saying this is the next step in evolution, is this bike really an evolution or a revelation, so to speak, out here in India? Well, let's find out. Now let's start with the way this bike looks. It's a lot more compact, a lot more chunky, a lot more muscular, and boy does it look attractive. Up ahead you have this big, nice, chunky 160/70 section 17-inch tire. It adds a great deal of bulk to the front end. Come up ahead you have a nice solid 43mm fork, an upside down fork. Not a lot of travel out there. You have an all LED headlight unit with bulbs indicators. Coming further up to the handlebars, well, you have this nice flat handlebar. It's sort of like a flat tracker handlebar, which will have you seated a little forward set. Well, but it's nice and wide apart, nice bar and mirrors on there. And the display, well, you have this 4-inch TFT display, something, once again, that traditionally breaks away from the old school Harley-Davidsons that you've been accustomed to seeing over the course of time. It's an all digital display. Coming back to the tank, you have a nice 12-litre unit, which should give you a good amount of mileage out on the highway. You should be able to cover a good amount of ground.
Under the tank, you have a big 1200cc Revolution Max engine, which is the real highlight of this Harley-Davidson motorcycle. It's almost identical to the unit that powers the big Pan America ADV. You will also notice the suffix T to the engine's name, and that stands for torque. So while with the Pan America you'll have to shift down a gear to take on tricky terrain, with this bike, well, it's designed to rip up streets. So peak torque is more accessible in the mid-range of the power band. Like with the big ADV bike, the engine out here is a stress member in the frame, and that helps reduce weight.
Now this bike is powered by the Revolution Max engine that you have in the Pan America, the big adventure bike, and there's a big mountain of torque. There's a good amount of power as well, 120 PS. It's slightly lower, around 30 PS lower than what you have with the Pan America. But in terms of torque, yes, it's around the same amount of torque, around 127 Nm, and power delivery is just phenomenal. Low down the power band, not so much so, around 2000 RPM, short shifting at that rev limit. Well, it does get a bit clunky, but once the needle goes north of that, man, this thing just flies.
The Sportster S comes with a host of tech and riding aids that includes ride modes like road, rain, sport, and there's even some customizable options that allow you to set the engine maps, engine braking, traction control, cornering, ABS, and so on as per your preference. You even have Bluetooth connectivity and cruise control. But the ride modes are my favorite. In sport mode, this bike just goes ballistic and you'll have to really hold on tight to stay on the bike, which is exhilarating and unlike any other Harley-Davidson I've ever ridden before.
So now in terms of ride and handling, as you can see, the ergonomics of it all, it will have your legs a bit forward set. This is the stock position, which is rather very cruisery. And the handlebars, well, it will have you hunched forward a bit if you're the same height as me, around 5'9". And it can get a bit cumbersome over long distances, honestly. You do have the option of another set of foot pegs where it's a little more mid-mounted, but that will cost you extra. that's a big setback with this motorcycle according to me, because in all honesty, Harley-Davidson have tried their best with this particular setup in terms of the chunky wheels at both ends, the weight of this bike around 230 kg. Given its wheel size alone, well, it's not going to be the best of handlers. Tuck it into a corner, it's not really all that comfortable. It just wants to sit up back straight. Lean into a corner, get off the gas. It does feel a little uneasy and out of place, but you always have to be on throttle, and with this particular machine. The ground clearance, not the best. It's at least 90 mm of ground clearance, so it's really low. Speed breakers can often be an issue. And of course, the suspension setup. Now, if you have a look at the rear and the front, not a lot of play once again. And this will take a toll on your back if you hit a bump. Given Indian road conditions, that's inevitable. And although the suspension settings are adjustable, you can adjust for preload, rebound and compression. Well, there's not a lot that you can really work with out there, and you will feel the brunt of it. If this bike doesn't bottom out, you are going to feel the brunt of it on your back and your spine. Out in some place like Delhi, this motorcycle, the Sportster S, will set you back by around 16.5 lakh rupees. Well, that's for the standard black colored variant. This alternate colored variant, like the maroon, will set you back by 15,000 extra. Now, is this bike a real revelation in a country for India? Well, in all honesty, no, it is not. So at the end of the day, it looks fantastic. It has a lot of visual appeal. It feels nice to ride over short distances, but over long distances, not so much. Although, if you are a Harley aficionado, you will really want to get your hands on this. It is like nothing the company has ever come out with before. It is very unique, it is sporty, but at the end, it's not the best in its category.
Well, with that, it's time for us to wrap up this week's edition of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. And you can follow our latest updates on Instagram. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye. Many thanks for watching. Drive and ride safe.